Coming up on this week's episode of CEO Yourself.
It's a good question. I think actually in reflecting on, you asking me what my CEO quality is with vulnerability, it's made me think a lot about how that's the center of every big decision I've made. I've had to be vulnerable to make those leaps, and they're so terrifying.
Jessica Yolanda Kaye is an esteemed artist. Today on CEO Yourself, we deep dive her CEO superpower, vulnerability. Jessica Yolanda Kaye, welcome to CEO Yourself.
Thanks.
And thank you for having us in your beautiful studio.
Lovely to be here. Love what you've done with the place.
Which has turned into our studio.
Amazing.
You
good to be back.
Incredible. Welcome home.
Thank you very much.
Jess, I don't know when we met actually. When did we meet?
We met quite early into my London stay, about a year in, so about now 4 or 5 years ago, when I messaged you on Instagram, I think, I realized you lived in the same street as me basically. And I think then you wanted some art for your flat and you invited me over.
Oh, of course.
And I brought like a tube of art and rolled them out on your floor. And then we had a bottle of wine, as you do.
As instant friends do. And what is so beautiful, you've just reminded me, what is so beautiful about that is at the time I was single and I said to you, I'm manifesting bringing the right love into my life. Mm-hmm. So you did 2 paintings. Mm-hmm. One was a woman on her own and one was a couple intertwined.
Yeah.
And I met Ant soon after.
Yeah.
And they're now in pride of place in our home and he loves them so much.
Oh,
I think one of his most favourite pieces.
Oh, I love those pieces. Yeah, I remember that and I really enjoyed, that you were so vulnerable up front, and that makes my job so much easier because, I could tell you were wanting to hold on to your independence, but also were feeling ready to let someone into your life. And that's what those 2 pieces really touch on.
What I found amazing about that journey with you is that that collection at the time was line drawings, but you were able to bring to life who I was and where I was at in such a seemingly simplistic design. Talk to me about the process of that collection.
Yeah.
Or that time in your life.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you feel that way about those pieces. I think there is a bit of a misconception that a single line work or abstract art is simple. And I think what makes it so exciting to me is that I find it very challenging to try and capture a complex moment or person or experience in one line. So the goal is to reduce something to its essence. And that has always really excited me. But for the first couple of years, around when I met you and I was doing that work, it was really a form of therapy for me. So art has always sort of been an escape from the world, but particularly line drawing in that time, it was how I sort of made sense of the world. And yeah, single line was both something that I was interested in visually, but also was a constraint, which is really helpful as an artist, because otherwise there's an overwhelming amount of things you can be painting. That's a long way of answering your question.
Your art for me is so relatable because of the way that you express it. I'm not an artist, I'm not a creative per se, but I am able to understand so much more of the depth and the journey that you go on as an artist in creating a piece, because you are more than just an artist. You are a true creative. You have a Substack now. You're a writer. You're so eloquent in your descriptions of the process. How have you evolved into that place and that offering?
Writing is a relatively new form of expression for me. I think I do feel like a very much a beginner, because art has always been my language. Drawing, painting, that's what I've done since I was really little with my sisters, with my friends, and it comes somewhat naturally to me. But over the last couple of years in sharing my work on Instagram and sort of learning how to take people on the journey with me, I felt I needed to sort of let people in a way that more people can understand. And words is sort of the gateway to that. But I think Instagram's a little hard because it feels so surface level, or I don't know, polished and at arm's length. So Substack for me was a way to break down barriers and actually write more freely. And it's been really amazing. I've learned so much about myself through that experience.
What I have enjoyed as your friend as well is watching you push your own boundaries. Because, for example, writing, I know you've been open about the fact that it's not something that comes naturally to you, but that you know it will help to evolve you individually, but also it will help to evolve your craft. How do you find the confidence to push your own boundaries?
It's a good question. I think actually in reflecting on, you asking me what my CEO quality is with vulnerability, it's made me think a lot about how that's the center of every big decision I've made. I've had to be vulnerable to make those leaps, and they're so terrifying. But ever since I quit my job, I realized that if you have that little flame inside, or that voice that's saying, oh, I really want to write, I want to paint a different type of painting, I want to move city. If you ignore it, it doesn't go away, and it often comes out in sickness or exhaustion. And so with every leap that I've taken, it's given me the confidence to take the next leap. And I still have to coach myself. All the fear comes up and I have to sort of coach myself, this is the first time you're doing this, it's going to be okay. And then just sort of take the leap anyway. But I now feel like I don't know how to do it any other way. Like ignoring those voices is almost harder than leaning into them and sort of stepping into the unknown.
No, it's such a common theme, and it's something I really want to resonate with the listener and for them to hear from us is if you don't listen to that voice within, it doesn't go away. It just gets louder and angrier.
Definitely. And that whole idea of your body works for you, not against you. So if you're, constantly bloated or a recurring sinusitis or
tired,
insomnia, it's your body trying to sort of tell you something's not right. And for me, it's often when I'm living out of alignment with what I really value. And so sickness is an opportunity to kind of take stock of where I'm at in my life and what's sort of not aligned, and then try and course correct.
You live so authentically and seemingly so in line with your truth. How can you encourage listeners to do the same?
Oh, it's definitely been a journey. I think the first 22 years of my life, I was completely on autopilot and not living in alignment. And I had to reach sort of rock bottom to completely turn around and start to sort of reclaim my sense of self, and then, live in alignment. So I think the starting point is checking in with yourself and developing a self-awareness. Hopefully you don't have to reach rock bottom, but if you're feeling off, you're feeling tired, you're feeling uninspired, all those little cues or opportunities to sort of slow down and ask yourself, like, where in my life am I unhappy? And to be honest, like, journaling is such an amazing tool for that. A blank piece of paper might seem daunting at first, but if you can just start to sort of word vomit how you're feeling or what's playing on your mind, the more you do that, the more you can sort of make sense of what you're feeling. And then I think it really helps understanding how people get there. Because I think when you see someone who's seemingly living in alignment, there's this assumption that they've always been that way. And I think that's just completely not true, and definitely not for me. I mean, every year feels like 10 years of growth since I've become conscious or self-aware. But I think a big part of that is hitting rock bottom. And so I think it's nice to sort of hear more about those stories. And because
there is so often a perception, particularly in the Instagram world that we live in, looking at a incredibly beautifully curated feed like yours and the evolution and journey of your career, that it all just naturally unfolded and fell into place, and that's not the truth.
No.
It never is.
No, not at all.
So what were you doing before you pursued your artistic career?
So when I was 22, I was working in an advertising agency in Sydney. I was a year in, sort of fresh out of uni, and deeply unhappy. I don't think I even knew it at the time, but I was really unwell, as we sort of were mentioning before. I had like chronic health issues and insomnia, and Matt had encouraged me to go see an acupuncturist. And one Saturday, I was sort of lying there covered in pins, and she was asking me about my week, and I think she could sort of sense that I wasn't particularly enthusiastic about my work. She asked me whether I enjoyed my work, and I sort of said, no, not really. And she said, well, why do you do it? And left the room. And I was lying there covered in pins thinking, why do I do it? No one had ever really asked me that question, and I had never really asked myself that question. And I became immediately consumed with emotion and bawling my eyes out lying there. And because she had left me covered in pins, I had no choice but to sort of think. And I actually quit my job the following Monday without a clue of what I was going to do next. No plans. I had never considered being an artist as a career, but it was a turning point for me because I just realized I was so unhappy it was making me sick, and I needed to sort of figure out, what was behind that and how I could sort of carve a new path forward.
Why do I do it? That's the question that I want anyone out there who's wondering to ask themselves and sit with.
Exactly.
Just surrender to that question and journal, as you said.
Yeah, and I was doing it because I was completely and utterly achievement oriented. Everything I had done until that point was in service of achieving and imagining how that would look in the eyes of other people, wanting to get into the top netball team or wanting to sort of get good grades at school. The uni degree I did was not at all out of passion. I did a business degree, and which was so rogue for me. But I got a scholarship, so that was the only reason I did it. And again, not for the right reasons, because it looked good and sounded good. And I was, so unhappy. So I think, that was the turning point to sort of learn how to make decisions from a place that is empowered instead of scarcity minded or sort of seeking validation.
That resonates so deeply with me. And I'm sure it will resonate with so many out there, how different does it feel being on the journey that is in line with who you are?
It's so much better. So much better. It takes a long time to untangle that mindset, and I think I'm only in like early days, it feels like, in learning how to do that. But just the simple act of questioning your decisions and taking a moment and thinking, am I doing this for how it will look to other people, or because it's what I'm supposed to do, what I should do? Or am I doing this because it's genuinely aligned with what I care about? And the fulfillment and meaning that comes from your life, if you can sort of choose the latter, is you can't compare it to sort of seeking validation. Yeah.
And on that note, I remember at the same age feeling very lost and very unhappy. And I read a quote that the only person that you owe the highs or lows to in your life is yourself, and that it's no one else's fault where you're at, and that the only person who can course correct, as you said, is you. And I remember that sinking in so deeply and heavily, that the only person who could change my circumstances was me, and that the only person who was responsible for where I was at that moment in my life was me. Yeah,
it's so true. And it takes a lot of courage, but what's the alternative? Sort of staying in a job you're unhappy with, or a relationship you're unhappy, there are so many different situations that you can apply that mindset to. I mean, I love I think Mel Robbins talks about this, sort of paraphrasing Theodore Roosevelt, the idea of you can either get in the arena or stay in the stands watching other people and never know what it would have been like. And the idea being that you can either try and fail, but at least you tried and you knew, or you can sort of, I think it's almost harder to never give it a go. So I think the more you sort of flex that muscle, you realize that you'd rather just give it a go, and failure is not as scary as never trying.
And it's so easy to end up somewhere you don't want to be because you're pursuing what you feel is perceived as what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Or opportunities presenting like an incredible scholarship. And of course you're going to take the incredible scholarship, but
exactly.
How can you more specifically encourage the listener to sit and be really clear with what is true to them? Because of course, if you go to your parents or your friends or those around you with an incredible scholarship opportunity, it is going to be hard to waver from that.
Definitely.
How can you encourage someone to really, truly feel in line with making the right decision for their truth?
Good question. I think it ultimately comes down to knowing what you value. Mm-hmm. So one of the biggest realizations for me is that a meaningful life is made up of a series of meaningful days, and taking the moment to think about, for me to go to bed and put my head on the pillow feeling like, oh, today was a good day, today mattered, like what did you need to do? And it's actually less about, doing and achieving, and more, for me it's having creativity in my day. It's learning. That might be, listening to a podcast. It's connecting. So that might be like quality time with my husband or a friend. It's moving. And so that might be a walk or Pilates. It's gratitude. So that can just be asking myself, 3 things I'm grateful for. And yeah, it's just little things like that are small, but really make you feel like you're fulfilled. And I think another big thing for me is setting a word for the year, which is a gateway to understanding yourself a little bit more, and ultimately is about growth. I don't think I know all my values yet. I think every year I pick up a few and I think, oh yeah, that really matters to me. Or, quality time with family matters more than seeing lots of people and having sort of short connections.
I hope you're loving this week's episode. To find more inspirational resources and to shop our new product range, visit ceoyourself.com. Your word of the year has been introduced into my life and has changed my life in a lot of ways. Yay. I've shared it on Instagram, and so many of my followers have since done it and shared with me how it's shaped their years. I did it at the end of last year with a big group of friends over dinner. I asked them at the beginning of the day what their word of the coming year would be. And then over dinner we went around the table and we all went through and shared what our word for the year was going to be. My word for this year has been bravery, which encouraged me to make some difficult decisions lately that I would not have made if I'd stayed in the fear mentality. Where did that come from, the word of the year?
I'm so glad you do it. I love this. I bump into people all the time now, and just in Sydney, and who tell me that they've been doing it for years, and it's so amazing how such a simple practice like picking one word for the year can actually change your life. And I've done it for about 5 or 6 years now. And actually the first time was when we moved to London. I had no friends when we came. I didn't know what I was doing work-wise. Like I didn't have a clear path. And I found myself sort of clinging on to whatever I could sort of to take control of. And I was feeling very on edge and out of my depth. And I think I just had a moment of realization that if I was going to be able to make the most of living in London, I had to let go. And it was approaching the new year, and I just turned to Matt one day and said, I think my word for next year is surrender. And that was the first time I'd ever done that. And he decided, oh yeah, I'm going to pick a word too. And then it was such a useful practice and something that I thought about every day. Little moments where I was maybe armored or guarded, I just think, oh, let go, like surrender. And it just sort of helped me make the most of that first year in London and make friends and take risks. And then every year December rolls around and I think, oh, like how was my year of surrender, or my year of balance, my year of exploration, my year of play? What did I learn? And then that helps me pick my word for the next year, because there'll be something that I'm still struggling with, or that I'm wanting to discover more about. And yeah, I absolutely love it. I think about my word every day. And yeah, my word last year was play, and that was the most transformative ever. So I think it just gets better with every year.
Amazing. And I really want to encourage those out there listening to pick a word. Doesn't matter where in the year it is. It doesn't have to be December 31st.
No, not at all. I mean, I now apply words to everything. I give myself a word for the month. I give myself a word when I turn 31, and I gave myself the word confidence for the year of 31. So I think I'm sort of level 2 of words, but you can pick a word at any point for the year.
So speaking of words, let's move into your CEO superpower, which is vulnerability. I know we've touched on it, and I've said this quote before, but one of my favorite quotes I've ever heard is strength through vulnerability. And I was researching vulnerability, and a lot of what came up around it was how vulnerability allows us to know ourselves and others in a greater way, and how it allows us to cultivate strength in our relationship with ourselves.
Definitely.
We instantly connected on vulnerability, because as soon as you walked in my door, I kind of, as I always do, just word vomited everything that was going on in my life. And that has been our relationship ever since, is that you have, every time we see each other, we go for walks and have coffee, and there's no kind of surface level chit chat with us. It's always deep diving right into where we really are and being super vulnerable with one another, even with things that perhaps I wouldn't share with anyone else at that moment. I've always felt so able to just totally indulge myself with you in what's happening within. But you've used vulnerability in so many areas of your life. For the listener out there, wherever they are in their life, CEO yourself is not about becoming a CEO. It's about becoming the CEO of your life, how you can be the very best version of yourself. How would you encourage the listener to use vulnerability in their life?
Good question. I think my understanding of vulnerability is that it's stepping into your truer self despite what other people think. And so I think, like we were saying before, when you are faced with an opportunity to take a job or move cities, or even a small, decision like what you're going to wear that day, giving yourself permission to really think about how you feel about it. And more often than not, I think we make decisions on autopilot, and we ignore these little impulses and these little voices inside that are telling us to try something new, do something new, or wear that random top. And I think it's just learning to actually listen to that voice. That's the first step. And then if you can learn to take small steps in that direction, that I think is being vulnerable, because stepping out of your comfort zone, stepping into the unknown, doing something you've never done before is really scary. And I mean, I started boxing last year, which I'd never ever would think I would do boxing, but I was trying to strengthen my back, and the trainer sort of brought boxing gloves out, and I thought, I don't think this is me. And I absolutely love it. And I was so embarrassed putting on the gloves the first day, and if I hadn't given it a go, I wouldn't have discovered something that is so empowering and liberating. And now I do it in London. I went back to Sydney, and I sought out a boxing trainer and did boxing classes. And this is all to say that if you can push past that initial fear and discomfort, you actually give yourself space to discover things that you never would know you enjoy, and actually discover who you are on a deeper level. So yeah, small little acts of courage.
So as I touched on earlier, you are more than just an artist. You're a creative, you're a writer, but one of your pursuits is to encourage people to live a creative life. How did that come about, and how do you live a creative life?
It came about around 2 years ago when I was really creatively blocked. Sort of shortly after the pandemic years, which were my busiest years. I was pumping out so many artworks and things were going really well. I was really busy, which I was, so grateful for. But I had worked sort of 7 days a week for such an extended period of time. I was so burnt out and I really had no energy to bring to my art for the first time. And it was quite terrifying because I'd built a business around a style that I no longer felt connected with. And I was, really unsure of how I was going to get out of it. And I ended up spending a week in Siena in the sort of Tuscan countryside. And as I was getting on the plane, I turned over to my friend and said, my goal for this week is to get inspired. And that was sort of actually the first time I'd set an intention for a holiday, which is now a side note. It's something I do and really recommend. But yeah, that whole week, my goal was to get inspired. And so we went to art galleries and we went for long walks. And I realized that week in feeding myself with, beautiful scenery and beautiful conversations and being with people who are really spontaneous and about, let's go there, let's go there. And I had a whole agenda for the day and they were like, no, let's go there. And that whole experience just sort of woke me out of this like productivity mindset and reminded me that feeding yourself with inspiration and input is so much more important than output. I for so long focused on collections and products, and I'd forgotten that the most important thing is actually that inspiration and that input. And so that trip taught me to feed that other side of myself. And I came back and I started prioritizing podcasts and more time away from work, long walks, galleries, and that was sort of the start of me living a creative life. And that really fed into my creativity. And then...
How has your output been since you've prioritized input?
So much better. I mean,
Really?
that's the irony. Because I'm not creating to sell. If I'm following input, I'm genuinely feeding myself with inspiration and then I'm creating from that place. And it's very different to thinking of someone is going to hang this art on their wall or someone is going to buy this art. It just makes it much more meaningful and true, at least for me. But there's a book that really helped me unlock this even more, and that's The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. I give it to everyone. I went back to Sydney with about 10 copies. My bag was just filled with that book. And the essence of that book is that creativity isn't something that you have or don't have. It's something that you can cultivate in your life. And everyone has the opportunity to live creatively, because living creatively is actually just tuning into what excites you. So if you listen to a song that you like, it's not just stopping at listening to that song. It's maybe, researching about the artist and exploring more of that genre, and then going to a live show and sort of leaning further into that. You unlock parts of yourself that you didn't know were there. And the more you do that, the more you start to sort of live your life in that way. I don't know if that makes sense, but
how is play, which you touched on before, and creativity linked for you? Because for me, admittedly, I've been a workaholic and I've just been entrenched in the to-do list and the emails and perfectly executing my work day. And over that, over the course of that journey, I lost so much of myself.
Yeah.
And, I ended up, my release would be a bath at the end of the day, usually inevitably scrolling Instagram rather than reading a book.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I had a child and you're forced to be away from your phone and away from technology and forced to have really strict boundaries and to play and to sit. I sit with Xanthi on the floor and literally play with her toys with her and try to encourage creativity in her life. How can someone implement play and this creative pursuit in this digital world we live in, and in this frankly like difficult world we live in. You know, we're commuting, we're working long hours. Often the only kind of form of relaxation in the week is, you know, a dinner or a drink with a friend. How can you encourage someone to kind of stop and incorporate play?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's harder than ever now to play because we are encouraged to always be on. We have these phones in our pockets, and now like what would otherwise be a break is filled with, oh, let me just do that, or making the most of your time. And so we are completely conditioned to always be optimizing, always be efficient. And there's no time for rest. There's no time for leisure. And I think that has a big cost. And I've always done things like digital boundaries. I've always had a strange relationship with my phone, and I need space from it. I don't look at my phone for the first hour of my day. I leave it in the other room for hours, and I've needed that to be able to kind of connect with myself and people around me. But I always felt this barrier with my art that I couldn't get past. Like I was too afraid to be messy. So I was very neat. Before I did line drawings, I did hyper-realist art, which is really detailed watercolors and botanicals. And
I think that would surprise people. But I've seen them and they're absolutely incredible.
I was, the complete other way, super detailed.
It was such a pivot.
Yeah. And it was always neat. I've really struggled to be messy, and I found that really interesting. And I think there is something about play that helps you let go and stop thinking. And kids are the best teachers. You know, they'll scribble, and it's not about especially when they're really young, it's not about what will other people think of this work. It's just pure expression. It's pure freedom. And I think for me, the gateway to play was trying to let go of what people think. And I had to start playing in my art to, I think, be more playful in real life. So I'm trying to reverse engineer how I would give someone advice to be playful. But I think it's about trying to let go of other people's opinions. And I feel like I'm more playful now with how I dress. I'm more in tune with what excites me. And yeah, I actually think this ladders back to the legacy advice that you wanted. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead to that question.
No, please do. I always ask what each guest's legacy piece of advice is.
Yeah, so for me, it's lean into what excites you. And that's something I think about all the time now. And it really came from this year of play, because I think every day we're faced with so many decisions. In an artwork, there are so many decisions, from the size to the materials to the texture, the color palette, the way you're going to paint that stroke. There's infinite decisions within one artwork, and it can be really overwhelming. And I think in the past, I've thought about at the back of my mind what other people will like instead of what I actually like. And play forced me to let go of that voice and actually check in with what I like and what excites me, and make decisions from that place. And now I feel like I do that in all aspects of my life. You know, when I was getting dressed today, I was picking between two outfits, and I just sort of thought, okay, what excites me? And it's silly, but it really helps me clear those other voices and make an empowered decision. And yeah, I think that's connected with living a playful life as well.
Lean into what excites you. I love that. And I also feel lately, for me, it's been about leaning into where I feel in flow. Because when I'm doing something that isn't in line, it can often feel kind of like dread, heavy. I think that's where the exhaustion often pops up, or the insomnia, when you're not following the right road. Like I've often said to you, I feel like I'm on the right path, but on the wrong train.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think for me, for example, this project is just a passionate pursuit at this point, but everything has fallen into place so seamlessly and so effortlessly, and it feels so natural and it feels so comfortable, and it feels like such a joy, which is why I knew I just had to keep pursuing it. 100%. And it's that niggling voice, isn't it? You have that voice inside that is like, just do it. Just do it. Don't park it.
It's learning to listen to that voice. But then also, like you're saying, if you're feeling resistance and friction in your life, that's also an opportunity to reflect and understand why that is. And I mean, my word for this year is ease, which isn't about living an easy life, but it's actually a cue for me to check in with if I'm making aligned decisions. Because when you are in that state of flow, it's often because you have listened to those voices, you have leaned into what excites you, and then all these things sort of start happening organically instead of this stop-start sort of friction when you're making fear-based decisions. So I think it's a really important one to listen to.
What's next for you?
Good question.
I know you have your new collection coming, which I've had the great honor of previewing.
Yeah.
It's so remarkable. And
thanks,
ironically, I know you won't feel this way, but it looks like such a natural next step from where you came from to where you're going. But I know it was a long journey and a long personal evolution to get there.
Yeah, definitely.
What's happening around that? When are you launching? How are you launching?
So I think the new collection will probably launch around when this episode drops.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it was the culmination of a year of play. It's a collection of 14 artworks, 7 which are the biggest artworks I've ever done, which required a lot of vulnerability, actually. I was very scared with the first canvas and then absolutely loved it, found the whole process so empowering. And then the other artworks are these small pieces that are in vintage or antique frames. So Matt and I, as you know, love our vintage furniture. And whenever we go on holiday, we try and sort of sneak in a market. And I've been collecting antique French frames over the last year or two and matchmaking them with artworks. So there's sort of this contrast between the modern artwork and the antique frame. So yeah, it's a very personal collection, as they always are, but this one feels particularly special because it really did come out of that place of pure free expression, and it feels like a really big step for me. I'm excited to share it with people, and I
can't wait for people to see it.
Yeah. I think I have to mentally prepare as well for that, because being an artist, you put so much of yourself into your work, and I think I've gotten much better at it, but it takes sort of me consciously trying to separate my work from my worth, and so I sort of have to mentally prepare for that. But I do really feel proud of it, and I am excited to share it. So
it's definitely your best work yet.
Thank you.
Now, it would be remiss of me not to dive into something completely off topic, which is Jess and her wonderful husband, Matteo, live life in a way I've never seen anyone live. So I actually call it the JM lifestyle. Oh my God. And I constantly joke to them both, oh, of course, that's the JM lifestyle, that's the JM lifestyle. But you have all these little tips and tricks that you live your life by. For example, as you mentioned, waking up and not looking at your phone for an hour, putting your phone away.
Yeah.
I love the way you live your life, and I think there's so much that we can all learn from that. Can you share some of your little JM lifestyle tips and tricks?
Definitely. We are very intentional, borderline psycho with how we approach our life. But yeah, I think first one is that your morning starts the night before. Is a big one. So we try and sort of get out our journals and write down sort of the key things for the next day that we want to focus on or questions we want to answer. So you've sort of got a roadmap for the next day instead of waking up and not knowing what you're doing. So I think that's a really big tip I would give, is your morning starts the night before. And also that might be kind of preparing your lunch for the next day or those little things that seem small, and when you think, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, if you can do them the night before, then you have the morning to sort of carve out for yourself. And mornings are my favorite time of the day. I think there's something really special about waking up early, because it's like these extra bonus hours of the day when no one else is awake. And
how early do you wake up?
Normally around 6 a.m. And the first hour of my day, I am very strict about not looking at my phone. And it's really tempting. It's not something that's easy. I mean,
especially when you live on the opposite side of the earth to your family.
Yeah. So it takes a lot of discipline. It helps that our phones are not in our room. So that's another big one.
We've implemented that thanks to you.
Do you like that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting how people get freaked out at the prospect
really
of
hard
not
to do.
having their phone in their room. Mm-hmm. You buy an alarm clock for those who are like, oh, it's my alarm.
We bought a Lumi light.
Oh, nice. Yeah, waking up with that light. So yeah, not having a phone in the room. I'll wake up, make glass of hot water, and sit and journal for a bit. And that looks different every day. It might be writing affirmations. It might be sort of word vomiting the things that are on my mind. Might be writing a few things I'm grateful for, but just that act of sitting down and drinking something hot and just writing, it just is a really important part of setting me up for the day. And then I'll generally go for a walk. And Matt's new to enjoying walking. He always used to get frustrated.
He seems more like
I forced him now. He likes it.
He's more of like a gym workout guy.
But his whole routine is different to mine. This is he definitely has the same practice of not looking at his phone first thing and journaling first thing. But then he likes to train in the afternoon. I like to train in the morning. But we will always go for a walk together on the weekend.
What I think the thread is, though, is that you live with such intention and clear intention that you are so very present in the moment. Yeah. You know, the way that we communicated about preparation for this episode. Yeah. When you host us for dinner, you're so present in the moment. Your phones are nowhere to be seen. The candles are on. The music is fitting to the mood. The way you've set the table, the way you prepare the food. Because you allow so much clear space for everything you're doing. I think it's the same that carries through to when we go for a walk. You're so present in the moment and you hold so much space for me, because we plan things in advance and you've never cancelled, and you never would, because you're so true and intentional with how you use your time and your days.
Definitely. I think, living intentionally does help you be present. And I've only really realized this in the last year or so, that all these practices that we've picked up, not being on your phone in the morning or going for a long walk on the weekend and leaving our phones behind, is about connecting with yourself and the people that you're with. You know, now we have a practice at the end of each month. We talk about the things we've learned, and we then write them down. And bit by bit, I think you start to sort of understand your principles, and that then informs the decisions you make, the holidays you go on, the places you travel. And just taking a moment to think about, what's my intention for this trip back to Australia. It really helps you live more meaningfully and be more present. So
the word games help you understand your values, which helps you shape your intentions.
Yeah, exactly. And it's this dance between, being intentional and before you go into something, and then when you come out of it, taking a moment and looking back and thinking about what you learned. So it's that awareness and that reflection, constantly going between the two and learning about yourself and about the world helps you live more intentionally.
I also get the feeling that you're very boundaried with your time, or conscious of your time. I fall into the trap of being too busy and taking too much on. Today I was literally juggling too much, and I smashed one of my favourite glasses that we had made in Venice. And I, rather than getting upset, I just thought, that's such a reminder to slow down, because I was
Yeah.
kind of running out of the house and I had too much going on, and I was on a call, and it happened, and I was like, wow, okay, I need to slow down.
Yeah.
And as soon as I got in the car, I drove in a much more mindfully conscious way, because it was a quick reminder of I'm taking on too much, and I'm falling into that trap of the busyness of business that's easy to fall into.
So easy.
How do you ensure that you kind of manage your time well and you're boundaried in that?
I think a big part is how I start my day, and that's why I sort of bang on about mornings, because I think if you roll out of bed and you look at your phone and you're swarmed with messages or an email about something urgent, immediately your nervous system is through the roof, and the rest of your day is sort of in that manic state. If you take, for me it's an hour, it might be 10 minutes to sort of center yourself and then kind of face the day, I think you've got an anchor to be a bit more grounded. So I think protecting your mornings is the biggest one. And then giving yourself permission to take a break. I think, like we were saying before, we are always on and we are addicted to our phones. I really feel that. And so giving yourself space from your phone, giving yourself permission to go for a walk, to read a book, instead of always being on and optimizing your time and being efficient, I think is a good starting point.
You live not only a creative life, but a beautiful life, Jess. And I cannot wait for the world to see your beautiful new collection. I hope you write a Substack on the JM life.
Noted.
I'm sure you'll phrase it differently, but there are so many beautiful snippets and takeaways from today's episode that I hope positively impact the listener's life and help them become the CEO of their lives. You are honestly such a creative, inspiring force, and I feel so blessed to call you a friend, and I can't wait to see how your journey unfolds.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here. So proud of you. You are always so inspiring. Whenever we go for a walk, I feel like I've taken some sort of like energizing pill to take on the world. So I'm excited for other people to get to listen to your insights and continue to step into their power.
Thank you. It's a love-in. Thank you for being here. Now, where can the listener find you?
Good question. Instagram is probably the best way. Yeah, Jessica Yolanda Kaye on Instagram. That's how you find my Substack. That's where I'll sort of be talking about my new collection.
Perfect. We'll link everything below in the show notes.
Perfect.
And I can't wait to see what's next. It would mean the world to me if you would share today's episode with someone you feel would enjoy it. And don't forget to hit subscribe, like, and leave a comment.